of regulars who believed they owned the place. On the far end of the line, men in polished boots laughed, adjusting their rifles with the swagger of champions. Their jackets bore patches from competitions across the state. They weren't here to practice. They were here to remind everyone else of their supremacy. No one paid attention to the man who entered quietly through the side door, his boy trailing behind him. The man wore an old, faded jacket with no patches, no medals, no hints of who he really was. He looked like just another tired single dad. A little rough around the edges, boots scuffed, shoulders heavy with years of carrying burdens unseen. His son, maybe 12 years old, clutched a small paper target in his hand, and looked around nervously at the others who didn't seem to notice them. The champions group at the center. Lane laughed louder when they spotted the pair. "Hey, look at that," one of them muttered, just loud enough for others to hear. "Looks like someone wandered in from the flea market." A ripple of amusement passed through the crowd. The father said nothing. He guided his son to the last lane, quietly setting down a worn case that looked decades old, the hinges almost rusted shut. The boy's eyes darted between the laughing men and his father. His lips pressed together as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. The father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Doesn't matter what they think. Just watch. Just learn." His voice carried no anger, no pride, only a calmness that felt out of place in the noisy room. When he finally opened the case, the crowd expected to see some old, unreliable hunting rifle. Instead, inside lay a rifle that looked simple, almost unimpressive compared to the polished chrome and custom scopes the champions flaunted. Yet, to the boy, it was more than a rifle. It was a piece of his father's past, something he had never seen fired but had heard whispers about in late night conversations when the loneliness of missing his mother became too heavy. The boy asked softly, "Dad, are you sure?" The man's eyes, worn but steady, locked onto his son's. "I'm sure. Today isn't about them, it's about us." By now, the champions had gathered in the center lane, one of them preparing to fire a shot that everyone already knew would be flawless. He raised his rifle, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The sound cracked across the range, followed by cheers when the target lit up with near perfection. "That's how it's done, gentlemen," he announced, his chest puffed out. He glanced toward the last lane with a smirk. "Let's see if our new friend can even hit the paper." The boy's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but the father remained unshaken. He set the rifle on the stand, adjusted the sights with hands that moved out of habit, not hesitation. Every motion was efficient, precise, as though muscle memory was guiding him more than thought. He didn't even bother with the ear-splitting banter from behind him. His world, at that moment, narrowed to the rifle, the target, and the boy watching him. Silence fell when he stepped forward. Body squared, breathing slow. The mocking laughter quieted, curiosity taking its place. Something about his stance didn't match the man they thought he was. It wasn't the posture of a hobbyist. It was the posture of someone who had held a rifle under the weight of life and death. He exhaled once. The trigger broke. The sound wasn't different from any other shot fired that day, but the reaction was. The monitors flickered, and the digital score displayed something that made even the champions lean forward in disbelief. A perfect shot. Not just perfect, it landed dead center, breaking the record score that the self-proclaimed champion had set earlier that morning. For a moment, there was silence. Then whispers. Then the champion's forced laughter. "Lucky shot," he scoffed. "Anyone can get one if they try enough times." But his voice didn't carry the same confidence. His eyes lingered on the man's hands, steady as stone. The boy's face lit up with pride he could no longer hide. He looked at his father as though seeing him for the first time, not just as the man who worked long nights and came home tired, but as someone extraordinary. The father said nothing, only chambered another round, his gaze never leaving the target. This wasn't about proving anything to the men who mocked him. This was about showing his son that quiet strength, no matter how overlooked, could shake the ground beneath those who believed themselves untouchable. Another shot. Another dead center mark. Now, the range was silent for an entirely different reason. And in that silence, every man in the room began to realize. They had underestimated the wrong person. The silence stretched on, heavy and uneasy. Even the constant rhythm of gunfire from the other lanes faltered, shooters glancing over to watch what was unfolding at the far end. The man lowered his rifle with the same quiet composure he had walked in with, as though nothing remarkable had just happened. But to everyone else, the air crackled with disbelief. The champion, his pride wounded deeper than the paper target, forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. 2 shots. That's all you've got. His voice echoed down the range, trying to rally the laughter that had died on his lips. But no one laughed this time. Instead, they watched the father reload, his movements precise, mechanical, betraying a discipline that couldn't be faked. The boy clutched the edge of the counter, his heart racing. He had grown used to seeing his father as ordinary, as the man who packed his lunch, ironed his school shirt, and sometimes stumbled in late from double shifts with grease under his nails. But here, under the fluorescent buzz of the shooting range, he saw a different man. A soldier, a protector, someone who carried a hidden history in every calm breath. The father lined up another shot. His hands didn't shake, his breathing didn't waver. He squeezed the trigger, and again the monitor flashed another record-breaking bullseye. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The champion's jaw tightened, his face flushing red. That's enough. The champion barked, stepping forward. Anyone can get lucky 3 times. His bravado cracked under the weight of what he was witnessing. He grabbed his rifle, checked the scope, and raised it again. Watch closely, folks. This is how it's really done. The crowd leaned in, the tension thick. He fired, the bullet slicing through the air, striking near perfectly, close to the center, but not touching the line his rival had drawn so effortlessly. Applause was hesitant this time, quieter, filled with doubt. The father's eyes didn't leave the target. He didn't smirk, didn't taunt. He only prepared another round, lowering his cheek against the stock with the calm certainty of someone who had been here before. Not in a brightly lit range, but in deserts and forests, where missing wasn't an option. The champion fired again. Another near-perfect hit, just shy of the record. Sweat glistened at his temple now, his shoulders tense. The father raised his rifle once more. Another shot. Another perfect center. The boy's smile grew wider with every bullet. Pride radiated from him, not because his dad was humiliating the champion, but because he was witnessing the strength that had always been there, hidden beneath ordinary days. Who are you? One of the men muttered under his breath, unable to contain his curiosity. The father lowered the rifle and glanced briefly at his son before answering, his voice calm but firm. No one important. Then he loaded another round. The words stung more than any boast could have. No one important. Men who had spent years chasing trophies and titles, suddenly found themselves outclassed by someone who carried his skill like a shadow, quiet and unacknowledged. The champion's laughter turned brittle. All right, old man. You've made your point. Why don't you step aside before you embarrass yourself? But the tremor in his voice betrayed the truth. He was the one standing on shaky ground. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. Dade, you don't have to keep going. The father knelt slightly, meeting his son's eyes. I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for you. To show you something. His voice dropped, steady as steel. No matter how small you feel, no matter who ignores you. When the time comes, you don't need their approval. You only need to remember who you are. The boy nodded, his eyes shining with something deeper than pride. Understanding. The father rose again, chambered the final round he had brought, and took aim. The room held its breath. He pulled the trigger, and the bullet tore through the air with ruthless precision. The monitor lit up in bold numbers, confirming it without room for argument. He hadn't just broken the record. He had shattered it. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in stunned murmurs. Even those who had laughed at him earlier now clapped, unable to deny what they had witnessed. The champion, face pale and lips tight, lowered his rifle in defeat, but the father didn't bask in the moment. He simply packed up his rifle, closed the worn case, and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Come on, he said softly. That's enough for today. They walked toward the exit as whispers followed them. Who was that guy? Where did he learn to shoot like that? He made the champion look like an amateur. But the man didn't answer. To him, the victory wasn't over the champion or the crowd. It was over the doubt in his son's eyes, over the silence of years where he had been overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. As they stepped out into the fading light of day, the boy looked up at his father with awe. Dad, you're amazing. The father smiled faintly, pulling his son closer. I'm just your dad. That's all I need to be. Behind them, the shooting range buzzed with the story that would spread long after they were gone. The story of the quiet man who came in unnoticed, and left as a legend none of them would ever forget. The road home stretched quiet and long, the hum of the old truck filling the silence between father and son. The boy sat pressed against the window, staring at the fading horizon as the colors of dusk bled across the sky. His hands clutched the paper target he had brought, though now it seemed small compared to what he had witnessed. Every few minutes, he glanced at his father, as though he were still trying to reconcile the man who fried eggs for breakfast with the man who shattered a champion's record without breaking a sweat. "Dad," the boy finally said, his voice tentative. How did you do that? No one shoots like that. Not even the guys on TV." The father's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white for a fleeting moment before easing. His eyes never left the road. "It's just practice, son. Years of it." "Years of what?" "Hunting." The boy pressed. The father exhaled, a sound heavy with memories too sharp to touch. "Not hunting." The boy turned in his seat. "Then what?" His voice was rising now, filled with curiosity and awe. "You're better than all of them. You have to tell me." The man's silence stretched for a long time. He wanted to keep his past buried, tucked away in the corners of his mind where the ghosts couldn't follow his son. But the boy deserved truth, or at least a piece of it. Finally, he said, "I used to be in the military. A long time ago." The boy's mouth fell open. "The military? Like a soldier?" The father gave a small nod, his jaw tightening. "More than a soldier. I was trained for things most people never hear about." The boy's heart raced. "Like special forces?" The father's eyes flickered toward him, and for a moment, the weight in them was too much for a child to understand. "Something like that." The truck rattled along the road, and silence returned. But the boy's mind spun with possibilities. His father crawling through jungles, parachuting out of planes, facing enemies in faraway lands. It explained everything: the calmness, the precision, the way he never seemed surprised by anything. When they pulled into the driveway of their modest home, the boy finally whispered, "Is that why Mom used to say you saw things she couldn't understand?" The father froze, the key still in the ignition. The mention of his late wife hit him like a blow he hadn't braced for. His throat tightened, but he managed to say, "Yes. She knew enough." His voice softened. "That's why I left it behind when you were born. Because I wanted to be just dad for you." The boy swallowed hard, guilt washing over him. "I didn't mean." The father reached over, squeezing his son's shoulder. "It's all right. Some things are better left in the past." But even as he said it, the words rang hollow. The past never stayed buried. It lingered in the shadows of his dreams, in the tremor of memory when he heard gunfire, in the instinct that never left him no matter how many years had passed. That night, after his son had gone to bed, the father sat alone at the kitchen table. The old rifle case lay on the counter, closed once again, as though sealing a part of himself away. He poured a glass of water and stared at his reflection in it. The whispers from the range replayed in his mind. Who was that guy? Where did he learn to shoot like that? He knew this wouldn't be the end. Word would spread. And when word spread, sometimes the wrong people listened. Sure enough, the next day, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was low, gruff, and too familiar. "I heard you've been making noise again." The father's chest tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The voice chuckled without humor. "Don't play dumb. You shattered a record at the county range. People talk. And when someone with your history pops up, ears perk. Some of us still remember what you're capable of." His hand clenched the receiver. "I'm done with all that. I told you years ago. I'm out." "Funny thing about men like you," the voice replied. "You never really get out. The world doesn't let you." The line went dead, leaving the father staring at the silent phone. His stomach churned. It wasn't just about records or pride anymore. He had exposed himself, and that exposure could ripple further than he ever intended. That evening, the boy sat at the table, his target pinned proudly to the wall with tape. "Dad," he said with a smile, "can we go back tomorrow? I want to watch you shoot again." The father forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe. We'll see." But inside, he knew returning meant risking more attention, and attention was dangerous. He had worked too hard to give his son a normal life, school, friends, peace. He couldn't let his past unravel that. Yet, as the boy drifted off to sleep that night, the father sat awake by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the night. His instincts screamed that something was coming. Something he couldn't ignore forever. For years he had lived like a shadow. Unnoticed, unremarkable. Yesterday had changed that. And now, whether he liked it or not, the shadows he had left behind were moving again. The following morning broke with a strange stillness, the kind that feels less like peace and more like the hush before a storm. The father woke early, as he always did, his body trained by years of discipline to rise before the sun. He moved through the house in silence, pouring coffee, checking the locks on the doors and windows out of instinct rather than need. Old habits. They never truly faded. From his son's room came the muffled sound of steady breathing. The comfort of a child still deep in sleep. The father lingered by the doorway for a moment, watching, remembering all the reasons he had buried his old life in the first place. His boy deserved mornings like this. Ordinary, safe, untouched by the darker corners of the world. But the phone call from the night before still echoed in his mind. He carried his coffee to the porch, the wood creaking under his boots. Dawn painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, but his eyes were not on the horizon. They scanned the street, the parked cars, the shadows between houses. Searching, always searching. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then he noticed a black sedan idling 2 houses down. Too early for a neighbor's visit. Too deliberate in its stillness. He sipped his coffee, pretending not to notice, but every muscle in his body tensed. By mid-morning, the sedan was gone. But the unease stayed. When his son bounded into the kitchen, his hair messy and his eyes bright with leftover excitement from the day before, the father forced a smile. "Morning, champ." "Morning, Dad. Can we go back to the range today, please?" The boy's eagerness was infectious, his voice bubbling with pride. The father hesitated. His son noticed. "Are you mad about something?" the boy asked. "No," the father said softly. "Just thinking." He ruffled the boy's hair. "Maybe later this week. For now, let's just stick to school and homework." The boy pouted but nodded, trusting his father's word. But the truth was more complicated. The father wasn't worried about his son missing out on practice. He was worried about who might be watching if they went back. That evening, as the sun dipped low, there was a knock at the door. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Not the casual rap of a neighbor. The father opened it slowly, his frame filling the doorway. On the other side stood a man in a suit, polished shoes, clean cut, but with eyes that betrayed years of hard edges. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," the man said. "You're a hard one to find." The father's jaw clenched. "You've got the wrong house." "Do I?" The man tilted his head, glancing inside just far enough to spot the boy sitting at the table, bent over his homework. "Nice kid." The father stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. "What do you want?" "Relax," the man said, raising his hands as though he came in peace. "I just want to talk. Word is, you've still got it. Yesterday proved that much. And my employers, they're interested in men who haven't lost their touch." "I'm not interested." The man smirked. "That's the thing. Interest doesn't matter. Men like you don't get to just disappear. Eventually, someone always comes knocking." The father's stare hardened, but the man's words burrowed deeper than he cared to admit. "You've got a choice." The man continued. "You can pretend this never happened, keep hiding in plain sight. Or you can accept that the world hasn't forgotten you. Either way, we'll be in touch." With that, he turned, walking toward a car parked at the curb. A black sedan, the same one from the morning. The father stood on the porch, fists clenched, heart pounding. He knew this wasn't just a visit. It was a warning. And warnings always came before storms. Inside, the boy looked up as his father returned, trying to hide the worry etched across his face. "Who was it?" "Just someone from work." The father lied, forcing calm into his tone. The boy accepted the answer, but not without noticing the tension in his father's shoulders. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The father sat awake long after his son had drifted off. The weight of old ghosts pressing heavier than ever. He remembered the faces of men he had served with. Brothers in arms, some still out there, some buried in silence. He remembered the promises he had made when he walked away to never go back, to never let his son grow up in the shadow of the life he once lived. But now, the shadows were at his doorstep. And deep down, he knew something he didn't want to admit. The shooting range had been more than a mistake. It had been a signal flare, a beacon. And whoever was watching, they weren't going to let him fade quietly into obscurity again. The question wasn't if his past would catch up to him. It was when. The storm broke 2 nights later. It began with a sound the father hadn't heard in years. The crunch of boots on gravel outside his house at an hour when no one had business visiting. His instinct snapped awake before his mind fully registered the danger. In an instant, he was off the couch, crossing silently to his son's room. The boy stirred when his father touched his shoulder. "Dad," he whispered sleepily. The father pressed a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet, stay low. Do exactly what I say." The fear flickered in the boy's eyes, but he nodded. The father guided him to the closet, opening the false panel at the back. A precaution he had built years ago when ghosts still haunted his nights. "Get inside. Don't come out until I get you." The boy's voice trembled. "What's happening? Just trust me." The father's tone was steady, ironclad. "No matter what you hear, don't move." The boy climbed inside, clutching his knees to his chest as the panel slid shut. Darkness swallowed him, but his father's calmness steadied his racing heart. The father moved back into the hallway, every sense sharpened. Through the window he caught sight of figures, 3 of them, moving with deliberate silence. Not neighbors, not thieves, professionals. His pulse quickened, not with fear, but with recognition. They were coming for him. He reached for the old rifle case, pulling it open with hands that moved faster than thought. In moments, the weapon was assembled, loaded, cradled in his grip like an extension of himself. He hadn't wanted this. But it had found him anyway. The first intruder tested the door. When it didn't give, a second moved to the back. The father crouched in the shadows, waiting. He could feel the rhythm of his own breathing, slow and measured. Patience was survival. A window shattered. Boots hit the floorboards. The father struck fast. A single, silenced shot cracked through the dark, and the first man dropped without a sound. The others froze, realizing too late that they weren't hunting prey. They had walked into a wolf's den. The second man moved to flank, but the father was quicker, sliding into position with the fluid grace of a man who had done this countless times before. Another shot. Another body down. The third hesitated, panic breaking through his training. "We don't have to do this," he hissed into the night. "You made your choice when you came here." The father's voice cut through the dark, cold and final. Moments later, silence reclaimed the house. 3 men lay still, their mission ended before it began. The father stood there, breathing hard, staring at what he had done. Not with regret. He had no luxury for that. But with the heavy certainty that this was only the beginning. He dragged the bodies out into the night, leaving them in the shadows where no neighbor would see before dawn. The black sedan was parked nearby, engine still warm. Inside he found documents. His name, his son's school schedule. Surveillance photos of their home. His chest tightened. They hadn't just come for him. They had been watching his boy. When he returned inside, he pulled open the closet panel. His son's wide eyes met his. "Dad, it's over," the father whispered, kneeling. "For now." The boy climbed out, trembling. Who were they? The father paused. He had shielded his son from the truth for so long. But the time for half-truths had ended. "They were men sent to take me back. Back to a life I left behind." "Why?" the boy asked. "Because I was good at what I did. Too good. And men like that." He swallowed hard. "They don't get to disappear without consequence." The boy's lip quivered, but he set his jaw. "But you beat them. For tonight," the father said. "But there will be more." The boy stepped closer, clutching his father's sleeve. "Then we fight them together." The father's heart twisted at the words. So small, yet spoken with a bravery far too heavy for a child. He pulled his son into his arms, holding him tightly. "No. You don't fight them. I do. Your job is to live. To stay safe. To be more than what they want me to be." For the first time in years, the father felt the full weight of the path ahead pressing on his shoulders. He couldn't simply hide anymore. He couldn't pretend he was just another single dad working late shifts and cooking cheap dinners. His past had arrived at his doorstep, armed and relentless. And now, to protect his son, he would have to step back into the shadows he had sworn to leave forever. He sat awake the rest of the night, rifle across his lap, listening to the silence. Not the silence of peace, but of a battlefield between storms. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring choices. And